for inviting me to conference. I feel very honoured to have been invited and very, very pleased to be here today, because I want to thank you and everyone in the nursing profession and in our National Health Service for all the work that you do and the way that you often get criticised, but in fact people work in the National Health Service because they love their work, they love the profession, and they basically do it because they want us all to be healthy. So thank you all very much indeed for everything you do. And our politicians owe you a great duty, a duty to ensure that you can work with dignity and that you are not held back from providing the best possible standard of service to all of your patients, because I do understand the stress that so many of you go through every day. I talk frequently to local GPs in my own area as well as nurses in my local hospital, and I have worked in the past in the trade unions in the National Health Service. And so I want to outline to you today what Labour wants to offer to you in the general election. We are ready to step in and save the NHS from the cuts and privatisation that have happened over the past 7 years. Every day I ensure that our general election team is fully aware of the importance of the National Health Service. At our headquarters in London, the walls are decorated with original posters from the 1940s saying Labour's health service covers everyone, and the Tories voted against it. Nothing embodies our campaign theme, for the many, not the few, better than the National Health Service. Universal lifelong health care, free at the point of need. However, our health service is actually being dismantled by stealth. Over the past 7 years, our National Health Service has been driven into crisis after crisis. A&E departments struggling to cope, waiting lists soaring, and we saw last week the Tory cuts have exposed patient services to cyber attack. I want to pay a huge tribute to all the NHS staff and the way they've responded to this terrible cyber attack. The stress you must have faced trying to keep patients safe must have been intense, and still is. This is just another example of the extraordinary lengths all of you go to every day to keep our country healthy. I was talking to junior doctors and nurses at the James Paget Hospital in Great Yarmouth on Saturday. Like many, all its operations had been cancelled because of the cyber attack. Frankly, the cyber attack is highway robbery against all of us. We have to have investment in our NHS to protect all the systems so we're not held to ransom by criminals who are doing us all damage and doing us all down. You stepped up to try to protect our patients. Thank you very much for what you did. Our NHS is under threat from privatisation, which was brought in by the Health and Social Care Act. The privatisation has gone on a huge scale. £13 billion of taxpayers' money handed over the last year to private companies to profit from our NHS services. And Aaron Bevan once said of the National Health Service, "It will only last as long as there are folk with faith left to fight for it." I say to everyone, remember those words, those prescient words of Nye Bevan. And in all my life, I've been involved in campaigns to support and defend the National Health Service. And I know that every hospital has friends. Every GP surgery has friends. There are millions of people in this country who are utterly determined to defend the principle of a National Health Service, free at the point of use for everybody in our society. We're here in Nye's legacy. And in hospitals, health centres and communities all across the land, there are many people who are listening very carefully to this election and thinking very carefully about their future. People for whom working in the NHS is a privilege and a pleasure. Like so many in public service everywhere, people work in it and believe in the principles of the NHS, a service like no other. Not a service which checks your bank balance before it checks your blood pressure. I'm always astonished when I talk to people from the United States. We talk to each other in a normal way about each other's health. That's a normal conversation. Many in the United States talk about the quality of the private health insurance they've got. They lack what we have, which is one of the most civilized things about our country. That is our National Health Service. We are utterly determined to defend it. I wanted to say something about the state of nursing. Because Britain is not being run for the many. It's not being run for the majority. And across our country, I believe people are being held back. If you're a student nurse without a bursary, doing a second job to make ends meet, you're being held back. If you worry about your children because they can't get together a deposit for a home or afford the deposit to rent a private place, then you're being held back. If you manage a ward in a hospital and you can't free up beds because of the cuts in social care, then you have a problem. The government is holding you back, stopping you from doing properly the job you were trained and proud to do. We are the 6th richest country in the world. It cannot be right that we have these problems. It cannot be right that trained nurses are leaving the profession for other jobs. It cannot be right that tax giveaways for the very rich and big business have been put in front of the needs of funding our National Health Service, social care, and proper treatment for all NHS staff. The RCN, your union, has found that nursing shortages have doubled in the past 4 years. We could have 40,000 fewer nurses than we need by 2026. Your pay has fallen 14% in real terms since 2010, and you don't work any fewer hours for it. That is the record that the government has left us. I wish there could be a public debate on this record with Theresa May, but she seems reluctant to have that public discussion. Last week, a doctor from Leeds called Romana told her she was considering quitting the NHS after 12 years of service because of crippling frontline staff shortages which have worsened as a result of government's failure to properly invest in the NHS. She asked why Jeremy Hunt had been reappointed since he'd demoralised the entire workforce. There is apparently no answer to that question. You have to ask Jeremy Hunt when he makes himself available to answer questions. Which I'm sure is only it's only a matter of time, and I'm sure he's going to be pitching up any time soon. But we do need a government that recognises the truth of what's happened and what is the real scale of the crisis. Because if you're a Prime Minister that is a party that once called itself the Nasty Party, you have to wonder about their attitude towards the National Health Service. And then pretend you support working people and the National Health Service. Come on, we're not fools. We need a government that will stand up for the hundreds of thousands of workers in this country who are not being paid the minimum wage, the 6 million who get less than the living wage, the 0 hours contracts and employment agency malpractices. We need decent working conditions for everybody in our society. Because if you charge people tribunal fees, you can't go to get justice in the workplace. I think we need a different approach to employment as a whole. And therefore, the Labour Party is putting forward a very different agenda of workers' rights and employment rights, proper funding of public services in this election. Can you imagine what the NHS would be like in 5 years' time if we carried on with this underfunding, carried on with this level of demoralisation in the workforce? It would be unrecognisable as a National Health Service. In name, cut back, broken up and plundered by private corporations. I want to make it very, very clear. We, the Labour Party, are very determined to put the NHS back on its feet, to move towards a national social care service, to give everyone the care and dignity they deserve, and make an utter reality of the parity of esteem between mental and physical health a reality. I feel very passionately about the NHS, but I also feel very passionately about mental health services and social care services. We have 1 million people, often very, very vulnerable people, not getting the social care they need. Many, often women, give up jobs in order to care for elderly relatives because the service isn't there to do it for them. And our mental health service, where 6,000 mental health nurses have lost their jobs in the past 7 years, is under enormous strain. There's a mental health crisis in this country. 1 in 4 of us will have some kind of crisis during our lifetime. It's not much help if you're told to wait 6 months before you get any effective therapy for that crisis. I pay tribute to and thank all those that work within our mental health services, but I'm utterly determined that parity of esteem will be a reality, and there will be a properly funded mental health service all over this country in the future. And today we're making it very clear that we're pledging an extra £7.4 billion a year for the National Health Service throughout the next Parliament, including £2 billion annually to modernise buildings and IT systems. This funding settlement will allow us to guarantee access to treatment within 18 weeks, cutting 1 million from the NHS waiting lists by the end of that Parliament. Ensure that those needing accident and emergency services are seen within 4 hours, helping another 1 million people each year. Delivering the cancer care strategy for England in full by 2020. That will help 2.5 million people who are living with cancer. Create a new £500 million winter pressures fund to protect patients from the problems that we saw earlier this year. This is our new deal for NHS patients. It will give NHS staff the support they need and deserve to give the best possible service to patients, and will guarantee that level of service. We will ensure the standards that the Conservatives have failed to deliver and which patients are legally entitled to are met in the future. But we also recognise that great services depend on retaining staff by rewarding them properly. Everyone in the NHS goes above and beyond every day what they have to do. Your ballot result yesterday showed how angry and frustrated your members are after a 14% cut in real pay over the past 7 years. We will not put you in that position. We will lift the public sector pay cap and hand back decisions on pay to an independent review body. We want nurses to be paid a decent wage. And, very importantly, we'll fund training and restore the bursaries for nurses, the vital funding the Tories chose at an end. Last week I was in Worcester talking to student nurses, those that had access to the student nurse bursary, And they were telling me they'd come into nursing after doing other jobs and other career paths, and they decided nursing was their calling and had come into it. And they told me how much they enjoyed it, how much they were looking forward to working in hospitals, surgeries, in the community, mental health, all the different aspects and skills that you all have. And they told me how proud they were of it. And I asked all of them, I said, if you didn't have a nurse bursary, would you be doing this? And they said, it would only be possible if you had a partner who earned enough to be able to fund you through the training to become a nurse. It is utterly short-sighted and counterproductive and totally unfair on the student nurses of tomorrow, on the nursing profession of tomorrow, and of the community of today. I'm utterly determined we'll bring back the nurse bursary so there isn't a nurse staff crisis in 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years' time. Let's invest for the future. This election will define the future of the National Health Service as almost no other has. Labour founded the National Health Service. We believe passionately and very strongly in the National Health Service and want to restore it to good health. It's central to our ideas of transforming Britain, to create a fairer society for the many, not the few. Tomorrow, we'll set out our policies in full in our manifesto. You may think you've read it already, but the real one, the marked copy, will come out tomorrow morning, and you'll see it then. And I'm very proud of the work that's gone into that manifesto. I'm very proud of the help and support we've been given and advice we've been given by people well beyond the Labour Party who've advised us on content to it and aspects of policy that we'll be producing tomorrow. Because the scale of our ambition will be very clear. The manifesto will be inclusive of all aspects of our society. It will be fair to all aspects of our society, and it will be fully costed. Every last line of it will be fully costed. Because we want to transform this country together. You do things better together, transform it together for a better society. Only a few weeks remain for that message to get across, to show you how we want to hand power back to the people of this country, so everyone in this country has a real stake in the future. A future, a Britain for the many, not the few. I want to conclude my speech by saying this. Those that work in the NHS represent all that's good in our country and our society. Our NHS represents that collective endeavour to ensure that we're all able to cope with illnesses and cope with stress. But there are also aspects of inequality within our society which the NHS has to cope with. Shorter life expectancy in the poorest parts of our country. Those that become addicted to many substances because of the misery of the lives they lead. Those that live in poor quality housing, likely to get ill. Those that go through enormous stress, likely to suffer mental health conditions. The NHS is great and it's wonderful, but we also need to reform other aspects of our society so that we all lead healthier, richer lives. I'm very honoured to be invited here today. I'm very grateful to all of you for the work you do in keeping us healthy. And I want to work with all of you in the future to improve the health, the happiness, the self-esteem and the opportunities for everybody in our society. Thank you very much for inviting me today. Thank you very much. Are you going to chair it? Yeah. Absolutely fine. And are you going to ask, do I stay here?
If you want to walk, that's fine.
That's fine. Yeah, okay. We now get questions.
Yes. So, Mr. Corbyn, I believe you and I both have leak issues because you've answered some of the questions we were going to ask you.
I promise I didn't see them before.
I'm sure you didn't. I'm absolutely sure you didn't. But just knowing our members, we're well prepared, so we do have some that we'd like to go to. I'd like to ask a question of you first. It's from one of our members, Claire Higginson, in the South East region. As nurses, why should we vote for you and put our confidence in your leadership? How will you benefit our profession?
I believe strongly in the National Health Service. Thank you for your question, Claire. I believe that the NHS has to be always free at the point of use, and I believe that nurses have to be properly treated, and that's why I've outlined our proposal bringing back the nurse bursary, but also bringing back the ability of all unions in the NHS to negotiate their pay and conditions by lifting the public sector pay cap. There's also a question of the protection of staff within our NHS and staffing levels within the NHS, and we will ensure that there is a legally enforceable staffing level in hospitals, because many of you work very hard, and I suspect pretty well everyone in this conference centre today often works well beyond the hours that you're paid for, because you won't leave until the patient has been settled, until a bed has been found, or until the next stage of treatment has been dealt with. And the stress levels within NHS staff are absolutely huge because you believe and care in it. It's up to us as politicians who want to see a good NHS to make sure you've got the funding and the resources to deliver the service, and I'm determined that we will do just that.
Thank you. Mr Corbyn, I've got a couple. Will you take two questions at
Of course,
a time?
of course.
Absolutely.
No
So Ed Freshwater and Coral Rees.
Good morning, Mr Corbyn. I'm Ed Freshwater, the voting member and the chair of the RCN Mental Health Forum. You've answered my question in part, but I would like to ask you, how will you, as Prime Minister, or in opposition, hopefully not, protect and promote the needs of people experiencing mental illness, and will you appoint a Minister for Mental Health?
Yeah, Coral.
Coral Rees, voting member, Children and Young People's Acute Care Forum. How will your party generate the money the NHS needs to function and develop the services everyone in this room believes the public has a right to expect?
Thanks for both those questions. Ed, first of all, on the issues of mental health, yes, there will be a mental health minister specifically dedicated towards that. Because if parity of esteem, which was one as an amendment to the Health and Social Care Bill, is to mean anything, then it has to be chased all the way through the system. And it's also a question of attitudes in society as well. And so I would want a Minister for Mental Health Services to also be looking at school mental health services, college mental health services, workplace mental health services. But it's also about our attitudes in society, because the stigma attached to those going through stress in society is horrible, and often it means career paths are damaged as a result of it. And I think we have to be serious about this as society. I've talked to a lot of young people who go through a lot of stress and are frightened to talk about it. They're frightened they're going to be labelled, and they're frightened that they won't be able to get any help. And too many end up taking their own lives because they're in a desperate and lonely place. And so we need to have a change of attitude as well as proper funding, and I want to see that we actually do achieve that. And that's why I appointed a shadow cabinet member to deal with mental health issues around the shadow cabinet table. I take it very, very seriously indeed. Thank you very much for your question. On Coral's question about children and young people and the funding of the NHS, all our proposals are fully costed and fully funded. They all rely on either moving existing budgets or changing taxation levels for corporates and the very top end of our society. 95% of the people of this country will have no tax increase, no national insurance increase, and no VAT increase by us. We want to make sure that there is a redistribution of wealth. It can't be right that we live in a country where the richest 100 people have assets of 600 billion. Can't be right. I want to see a fairer distribution of our wealth. And so we will give all the statements and details on that tomorrow, but we're very, very clear. We want to be a very responsible government, responsible to the people of this country, responsible for running public services in an efficient, effective way that helps all the people that they're designed to help and support. And the NHS is the best example of that. Thank you.
Can I have Matthew Sidebottom? And can I have Shelley Pearce? Matthew.
Matthew Sidebottom, Sheffield branch. I am now expected to work in this demanding job until I'm 68. Do you think this is safe for my patients? Do you think this is safe for me? And if not, what are you going to do about it?
Shelley?
Heidi?
We're taking two at a time, I think. No, he's chair, not me. It's okay.
Shelley Pearce's question from South East Region. Can we restart NICE's work to set safe staffing levels for all health settings?
Yes, on Matthew's question, I think 68, as they say, is too late. I'm going to have to ask you to be very patient for another 24 hours.
No, Mr. Corbyn,
you don't look anywhere near 68 to me either. But
as the chair, you wouldn't want to disappoint all these nurses now. The media will keep a secret.
They'll keep a secret. Yeah. I know. There's nobody else watching. There's nobody else listening. You'll be all right.
Tell me, I'll keep the secret.
I'll let you know later.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, absolutely, you're right. You get that. So you'll have to wait for tomorrow for that. But I do recognise the stress levels that have gone with so many, and the way in which what's known as the waspy women have been so shortchanged, and we will be dealing with those issues tomorrow. And Shelley, your point about safe staffing levels is absolutely true. I did refer to it in my speech, the staffing levels in hospitals, and they're often quite dangerous, and it means that nurses can't do their jobs properly because they don't have time to talk to patients. And actually, well, you all know this, when you go into a hospital, it's a very frightening thing for the person who's going in, the patient, and they want to be able to discuss their condition. And what so many people that have been in hospital say to me is they're absolutely full of admiration for the nurses and all the staff in the hospital, recognise how hard working they are, but they just don't have time to talk to the patient and understand the holistic person that's there in front of them. And so safer staffing levels are important to cover all the obvious needs, but they're also important for the well-being of the patient. And so we want to legislate to ensure that the staffing levels are maintained in hospitals. But I also recognise the staffing issues that apply in the community, apply in mental health particularly, but also apply in GP surgeries. Because if you're understaffed in a mental health unit, and you don't have time to talk to the people you're there to look after, then things can become very, very difficult. And it actually puts the understaffed people that are on duty often at risk as a result of that. So I'm very clear that I think, and I hope, understand that situation, which is why I want to put all these resources into the NHS to ensure proper, fair and safe staffing levels all across the piece, and that will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm aware of time, but I have one last question for you, Mr. Corbyn. It'd be remiss of me if I didn't ask it on behalf of Congress. So this is on behalf of you all. As a Labour man of your entire life and as someone who's worked with trade unions, what's your reflections upon our college's momentous decision around our pay poll?
I'm full of admiration for you as an organisation and a union, of what you've done and what you represent, and the professional aspect of your work as well, and the professional work that's done by the Royal College, which helps us to frame our thoughts and our policies. I fully understand the momentous decision you've taken because you've been so badly treated for the past 7 years with frozen pay, overwork, understaffing levels, and the threat of the sustainability and transformation plans around our hospitals, which, by the way, John Ashworth has said, and I fully support him on this, he wants to suspend and look at again so that we can ensure there are proper A&E access all across the country. And so, whilst Jeremy Hunt remains Secretary of State, I hope he will take heed of the decision you've taken. Take heed and recognise you deserve to be properly rewarded for what you do for all of us. Thank you for your decision yesterday. Thank you for your work as an RCN on behalf of all of us who love and admire and support our National Health Service. Thank you very much.
Thank you for answering our questions.